All right. Hi, my name's Paul Merca. I'm the publisher of paulmerca.blogspot.com. Thank you. First of all, thank you for watching our latest videos. And before I introduce my guest, if you enjoyed any of our previous videos, don't forget to comment by clicking on the envelope at the bottom of the post or by leaving a comment on our YouTube page. Today, my conversation is going to be with Bellingham native, Sehome High School graduate, Stanford graduate, and all cross country and track All-American, and most importantly, US Olympian in the marathon, Jake Riley, who's kind enough to join us from his home in Boulder, Colorado. Jake, first of all, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Glad we can talk Washington stuff.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So what are you doing now to stay busy now that we're in the midst of this coronavirus pandemic?
Well, I mean, I'm sort of in the midst of coming back from the marathon, right? We took a little bit of time off. And then, so just getting back into runs. We've just started workouts recently. We're taking a long, slow ramp up. We're not really trying to rush anything. We don't need to get aggressive with training. So it's just kind of trying to get back on our regular schedule, get in some decent mileage, and build a decent base. So whenever races really start to happen, we'll be ready to go when we kind of know a little bit more about the schedule. So looking forward, we're probably going to try and do some sort of fall marathon type of thing. And I could be doing stuff to get ready for that and just make sure that I'm in good shape. And the one nice thing about not having any races on the schedule is we can take care of some imbalances and some asymmetries and stuff, and do a little bit more strength work kind of in the gym to address maybe some aberrances in functionality, and really kind of get a lot of things correct to be ready when the racing starts again. And then as far as keeping busy, I'm still in grad school, so I have grad school projects that need to be done, and then I also work part-time as an SAT tutor, so I have students that I'm working with, so I got plenty to do.
Yeah. So like, what was your, just want to circle back for a second. What was your degree in at Stanford?
My undergraduate degree was in biomechanical engineering, and then I'm currently working on my master's in mechanical engineering here at the University of Colorado.
All righty. All right. So, there's I'm just scanning through a little bit of you during your days at Sehome. First of all, you gonna be able to get that hair back?
I try to disguise it, but it's getting a little bit thin on top, so I don't know that I could ever get the full volume. I think it'd look a little bit kind of flat on top. So I'm glad that I did it at that time. I cringe a little bit when I look at those photos, but it's nice to know that at one point in my life I could grow curls that lustrous. But yeah, I don't think we're ever going to go back to those days.
Yeah. I mean, give me some recollections about your time at Sehome. I know that while I was watching the marathon trials, announcing the MPSF meet at the same time, one of your former rivals was peeking over my shoulder trying to watch the race, Chris Kwiatkowski, who's now.
Oh yeah, he's assistant at UW now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah, so Chris, you ran for Bellingham High School. I ran for Sehome High School. So there's 3 high schools all about the same size in Bellingham. And Chris and I guess looking back, we can call it a rivalry, but he had my number pretty much the whole time. Unfortunately, I think he was dealing with injuries a couple of times when we would get to like cross country state. So I don't think I ever lost to him at the state meet, but pretty much every other meet he had me. I guess my senior year I beat him at districts. So, and we just had a really stacked district in general, because we also had Jordan Welling from down at Denison. He ended up running for NAU and then transferring to Western Washington. And then Sehome, we won state my junior year, and then we were second at state my senior year, but the people that beat us were like Burlington Denison. So we just had a really, really stacked district between all those schools. At the same time that my team was good, Squalicum, their girls team was really, really good. Chris was obviously crushing it. let's see, between my year and the year just after me, so I guess that would have been class of 2008. Like, we had a bunch of runners go Division I, both in the boys and the girls. Like, Bellingham, it's a lot of 2A schools. I think Squalica might be 3A right now, but I don't know. They seem to keep moving back and forth. So, we don't get quite the same notoriety as like, your Meads and Ferris and those big Spokane schools, the big Seattle schools. But we're definitely a distance running mecca. And, you go there and you run our trails, you understand why. Lots of duels with Chris over the years. And I think in the high school, I very much had the attitude that, like, you need to not like your competitor. You need to, like, run, try to beat them, and be kind of like aggressive and all about your team and not about anybody else, which looking back is really, I don't know, it feels kind of stupid because now I have really good relationships with most of the guys I compete against, and it's a lot more fun that way. So I think I had a reputation for being a little bit of a dick in high school, which I don't think I actually was. At least people that knew me didn't think so, but I think I had that reputation. I feel bad about that. But since high school, I think Chris and I have become friends, and I've seen a lot of those competitors since then.
Yeah. Now, it's like, I don't know if you remember the first time I met you. That was actually at the, believe it or not, that was at the 2010 Pac-10 meet here in Seattle. I'd seen you, from upstairs at the Dempsey, but never got to know you until the Pac-10 meet at Jefferson. You guys were 2010 conference champions, and then you're an All-American a couple times in cross country at Stanford, and then you scored 4 times at the Pac-10 meet in the 10,000, and you were an All-American in track. Now, through those, especially when you got to your junior, senior year, was there any thoughts at all that, maybe I can run professionally?
Yeah. So junior year, let's see, that would have been the year. So yeah, that Pac-10s where Chris, Elliott, and I went 1, 2, 3 at Pac-10s, and then I think I was 6th at NCAA Cross that year, and then in the spring I was 3rd in the 10K against some pretty stacked competition, because I think that year it was Chalanga and then Shadrach Biwat. So if you're going to lose to a couple guys, that's a pretty stacked duo to lose to. I think at that point I started thinking that maybe I could run post collegiately. I don't think it was ever, I don't know, throughout my entire career, I've never really thought about the next level. I was like, oh man, I'm doing really good at this level. Like that's awesome that I'm able to do that. So like when I started out high school, I didn't even know, it seems naive, but like I didn't even know that national competitions existed. And then I finally learned about it. Like somebody showed me DieStat like at the end of my junior year, and I was like, oh crap, there's like a Foot Locker Nationals. What's this story? And so I went to my senior year, and I was getting interest from collegiate coaches and that sort of thing. And so I was vaguely thinking like, yeah, it could be fun to run in college. And then I made Foot Locker Nationals, and then it was like, oh no, you could run Division I at a really good program, and maybe this could be like scholarship type of thing at Division I. And then I got to Division I, and again at Stanford, I was a little fish in a big pond. There's, it's a really stacked team, a lot of really good athletes, and so I was like, I just want to, be on this team and potentially help out. So, as a freshman, I wasn't really thinking about trying to make the traveling squad or anything like that. I wasn't really thinking beyond college. But then I just started to do better. I just kept my head down and did my work, and then it was started to pay off. And so towards the end of high school, I was like, the end of college, I was thinking, oh, maybe I could run competitively post-collegiately. Like, let's just see if there's some interest. And then had a couple good seasons sort of at the end of college, and then had interest from the Hansons and a couple other groups. I wasn't the top tier athlete, so I wasn't getting the individual contract type of thing, but the Hansons was a solid group, and I knew I wanted to move to the marathon. So it made sense. Like, yeah, let's go out and mix it up and see if we can make anything happen. What's the harm? I'm 21, 22, so may as well try and do a professional running thing. And I'm young, and I feel like there's still room for me to improve my times, and I think every time I've moved up in distance, I've had more success. So let's see if the marathon is something that'll work. And then at Hanson's, I think I had good, maybe not. I was able to support myself running, and I was having fun doing it for most of the time. And then the injury stuff started cropping up, and I had to reevaluate. But then I came back, and I'm glad I did. So each time my level has progressed, it's never been something like, I didn't start in high school and have an idea of the whole progression. I wasn't thinking like, okay, I'm going to do college, and then I'm going to be a pro, and then I'm going to be Olympian. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. Those were all sort of nebulous ideas of, wouldn't it be cool? But it was never really an explicit goal that I was working towards.
Yeah. So you join. This picture I have is of you at the 2012 Olympic trials in the 10,000. After this meet, you started transitioning into the roads while still racing on the track. What was the transition like, from the type of training you were getting at Stanford to what you were doing with the Hansons, especially, eventually you were going to go into the marathon?
The bread and butter didn't really change a whole lot. So, the Hansons are on like a slightly different schedule, because as a pro, you don't really need to be following kind of that 7-day week type of thing. So it was more of a 9-day schedule. So you'd have some sort of quality every 3 days. And probably the Hansons put a little bit more kind of interval work in there. So, 4 by 2 miles, 3 by 4, whatever it is.
Was that on the track? Was that on the road? Or
most of the workouts would be at this place called Stony Creek Metro Park. It's a 6-mile loop. It's got mile markers every half mile. It's a fantastic place to work out. It's nice and rolling. So, I think it prepares you perfectly for almost any single road race you're going to come on or come across, because it's like this nice asphalt bike path. You would get on the track every once in a while, and during a track season, we would certainly have track workouts. I think the biggest change for moving up to the marathon was just increasing volume. The Hansons are a pretty high volume group. So in college, I think I had a few seasons where I would get up to around 100 miles a week. At the Hansons, probably pushed that towards more like 110, 115. During my marathon buildups, we got up to probably 120-ish. I think my max I ever did was 135 when I was with them. So, that was definitely a bit of a transition, but we certainly worked into it. But in terms of the actual workouts themselves, not a huge transition. I think it's natural, especially as a professional, to get onto the roads. I think there's just a lot more racing opportunities.
Right.
There's more money if you want to be able to do that kind of thing. And also, the reason I fell in love with running was through cross country. So I like track, but I certainly like cross country more. There's just not a whole lot of cross country opportunities. And so road racing scratches a lot of that same itch. I can get on a course that's going to be different in every single city you go to, and there's you can be a little more technical with your uphills and your downhills and your turns. So I just find road racing to be a little bit more interesting than the track kind of stuff. And also I'm a little bit better at it. You don't need quite the finishing kick in a road situation a lot of the time, especially as you move towards those higher distances, which I think suits me. I think by regular standards, I have a pretty solid kick, but by professional athlete standards, I'm probably not going to be quite as dangerous over that last mile, half mile, as compared to some of the guys that are winning those 5K and 10K championships.
Right. Yeah. And so let's see if I remember, you won the national club cross country championship, and then you went on a couple of trips to England, to Scotland, if I recall.
Yeah, so I was part of that, what they call it, the Great North Cross Country Race, which is it was in Edinburgh. I think they've moved it. I think it's still going on, but I think it's in Newcastle or something now.
Yeah, I think
so. I haven't been since it moved from Edinburgh, but I did the Edinburgh trip a couple of times, and then I also we used to send teams to Japan to run the Chiba Ekiden, so I was on those a couple of times. So no highest level national teams like world champs, but I've been on a couple of those more minor U.S. teams.
Right. All right. So you make your debut in Chicago in 2014. You finish 11th in a 2:13:16. Do you remember what your thoughts were, after Chicago, that maybe you might be in the mix for a shot at the Olympic team 2 years later?
Yeah, I thought I was in the mix. I kind of, based on that, I expected that I could, if I were, I knew I would need to improve. I'd need to make a couple, strides if I was going to be competitive. But I think a 2:13, as far as the debut goes, especially at that time, was pretty solid for what American marathoners were doing. And I felt pretty happy about it, especially since I ran solo for a lot of that last probably 4 or 5 miles. And I went into it with no real expectations of what I was going to do. The nice thing about being with the Hansons was I was able to train with a bunch of guys that had 10, 15 marathons under their belts. And so it was essentially just put my head down, do what they do, listen to what they're telling me to do, and then just go out and race. So I didn't really have to do a lot of thinking or get super nervous about it. We had a really solid pack through like 15, 16 miles. But I think one of the biggest changes between when I was with the Hansons, sort of my early pro career, versus what I'm doing now is I think it was a mistake to not explicitly have the Olympics as a goal. I wanted to do well, and I knew that I was going to go to the Olympics, but I don't think I had as focused of a purpose when I was training for those, the U.S. championships that I would run, either track or on the roads. I didn't train with as much discipline or focus as I have been more recently, and I think it showed, because I think I would show up to a U.S. meet, no clear goal in mind, and then as soon as it came time to really get into the kick, when you really need to run with a little bit of heart and a little bit more passion, you can't just tuck in. I just wasn't there. And I think that was partly a mental game. I don't think it really had much to do with my training. But I think that was certainly lacking then. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've changed since I moved out here to Colorado instead of training with Lee.
Yeah. And then, so, it's like, 2015, you go under 28 for the first time at Peyton Jordan, and then you didn't do very well.
I put to bed. We can say it. Yeah,
you didn't do very well.
Yeah, no, it was not a good race. So that 10K. So let's see. I had run earlier that season. I had run the Cherry Blossom 10 miler.
Right.
And ran really, really well. So I think there was a little bit of a mix-up. They had to change the course at the last second because some woman got in like a car accident on the course. And so the course was just a little bit short, but had it been the length it was supposed to be, I was on pace to break the American record in the 10 mile. So crushed that race, came back, started running workouts, but then started to feel a little bit fatigued. I got a little bit overtrained early on. And so that 27:59 was like the last gasp. So I was able to put together that race, but I don't know, when a wheel's loose, it starts to kind of wobble back and forth a little bit. It was really starting to wobble a whole bunch. And after that race, the wheels just fell completely off. Every workout was worse than the last one. So by the time I got to the US champs, I was mentally out of it. And then also I was just overtrained and fatigued. So I remember as early as lap 2 or 3, I was wondering whether it was going to be more embarrassing to drop out or to get lapped. And I decided to stay in it and get lapped because I knew it was going to happen, because I felt flat and out of shape. And I was really frustrated with how that season ended because it had started off so well. But I think I got a little bit greedy and a little bit aggressive with the training, didn't give myself enough time to recover, and I paid for it.
Right. Now, if I recall, I thought I'd read somewhere that this was about the time you started having the Achilles issue. Is that correct?
I remember we at that Peyton Jordan meet, we stayed, our flight wasn't until the next afternoon. And so I did my first run after the race, kind of the next day in Palo Alto. And I was limping the entire time. And it wasn't that race that put me over the edge. I had already been dealing with Achilles stuff, but I just even at that point, the number of bad days were outweighing the number of good days. It took me, I think, 3 to 4 days to recover from that particular race. Anytime we would get on the track, it would take me a couple of days to get back to anything resembling a normal stride. So I spent a lot of my runs kind of limping along on like 1.5 legs. And so that was certainly when I think I had kind of imbalances and issues long before that, but it didn't start to become a noticeable issue that was really holding me back in my training until kind of that spring of 2015. And then, I didn't fully take care of it at the time. Now, I also probably had the Haglund's, the little bone spur thing at the time. So, what would taking care of it really have looked like? Would it have done that much? But, I didn't take care of it. And so it just kept getting progressively worse from then all the way till the Olympic trials in 2016 when I finally decided to take time off.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, this is, I've got this next slide. This is you finishing 15th at the marathon trials. And, this was the quote you you wrote me afterwards. I guess from were you going into that race? Were you pretty optimistic about your chances?
Again, I think I was telling myself I was optimistic. Yeah. I was telling myself that I was going to go in and I was going to be competitive. But I don't think I had trained. I had done the workouts, but I had not really kind of, I guess, emotionally committed to the idea of making the team. So I think I was going through the motions at the time. Okay. And so I was trying to psych myself up on the day of the race. And I thought that I had kind of psyched myself up. I definitely had a little bit of adrenaline, but I think it had been a while since I'd really gotten scared racing. And so, and that's only something I really recognize in hindsight. So before Chicago back in 2019, I couldn't sleep the night before the race. I had so much adrenaline going through me, and I hadn't felt that in a really long time. And I didn't feel like that before the 2016 marathon trials. So sort of intellectually, I was telling myself that I could make the team, but I don't think I was sort of emotionally ready to do that. And in the race, just like kind of those other early season races, I was on the back of the pack. But with your if you train for a marathon the right way, you can be in the pack through 15, 16, 17 miles because everybody can be in the pack, right? You've trained to run that far. But right. I didn't have the right mindset to actually make something happen when the pack started to break up. And sure enough, that was, I think, a 4-loop course. So by the time we headed into that 4th loop and the pack really started to get competitive, I was just off the back immediately. But I think my race had been over long before that actual break happened. I just don't think I was mentally ready to do it, and that's going to affect the physical side of things as well.
Yeah. That, I guess that kind of brings me up to to the next slide. You finished 3rd at the 25K road championships, and then you get 12th at the Olympic trials. Was there a little bit of a reset after the marathon trials to get ready?
Maybe a little bit. I mean, I probably took my 2 weeks off and then started to build back up. And I don't know that it was like the full reset, like go be depressed for a little while, eat some ice cream, and then come back completely like refreshed and over it. I think I had already decided I wasn't making the Olympic team in the marathon before I went into the trials. So of course it wasn't a surprise when I didn't. And then going into the track trials at this point, like the entire marathon buildup, we were down in Florida for that, and every single run hurt. And so I spent most of that time frustrated and just kind of, just not enjoying any phase of the training. And so I was just going through the motions through that kind of build up in the spring. And I finished 3rd at that 25K road championships, but the 2 guys that I lost to were probably the 2 guys that I should have lost to. So I don't think that was really a particularly special performance. And then when we got to the track trials, like I think I had basically given up halfway through that race. I probably should have finished higher than I did, especially because a lot of people dropped out the last part of that race, and I was in
Right.
fourth or fifth at around halfway. And when the pack broke, like I finished that race and felt like I had more to give, and I just didn't give it.
Yeah.
I was over it at that point.
Yeah.
And it's a big regret I have looking back. I feel like there's a lot of different things that I could have done, but I also think, we're talking very much in a track sense and just what I was feeling on the roads. But I was going through a lot of personal stuff at the time, so I just I needed to make a change long before I actually did make the change. So I think a lot of those races were decided not on the track, but kind of in the way that I was preparing for them and in the way I was approaching them.
Right. And I guess it's like I think some of the stuff that I read about you, before coming on, I thought I'd seen some stuff where you told some other media that you felt like you were starting to go into a dark place right around that time.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, so when I was with the Hansons, I was essentially just running. So I would work a little bit in the running stores, but pretty much all I was doing was running. A lot of the guys that I had joined the team with, or that had been there when I joined, had left kind of in this big group within like a 3 to 6 month period. So a lot of my best friends on the team were kind of gone. And so running wasn't going well. Socially, it wasn't going super well. I was in a relationship at the time, and that wasn't going well. So, it was just this big mix of things that all kind of contributed to, I'm not going to say I was like depressed in like a clinical sense, but I certainly wasn't I wasn't enthusiastic about anything that I was doing. I was just sort of like frustrated and in a bad mood, and just sort of not committing to anything that was around me. So I think that's one of the reasons I made the change that I did after the track trials.
Now, let's see. I'm assuming you were under contract with them until the end of the 16 season. Is that correct, or was
it? The way the Hansons do the contract, you're kind of on until you're off. So I probably had signed something, but they essentially are not real litigious in like making sure that a contract stays, and it goes through the Hansons. It doesn't go through Brooks. So it was kind of a mutual decision with the Hansons that I don't think I'm really able to get the best out of myself while I'm here. I need to kind of move back to Washington to be a little bit closer to family. I just need to make a change, and they were completely on board with that. So I think they understood that I wasn't giving them what I needed to give them. I wasn't getting out of it what I needed to get out of it. So technically I was on contract, but they were fine kind of breaking that.
Yeah.
There wasn't any issues from that side.
Yeah. So you go home to Washington for a little bit, and then you decide you go to Boulder, and then you meet up with Coach Lee Troop, and then how did you get to the process of figuring out that what your Achilles problem was really a Hagelman's problem?
Well, so let's see. After the track trials, I went back and I made a deal with myself that I was not going to put any race on the books until I had taken care of the Achilles completely, because everyone was hurting, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't run through it anymore. And so I saw a PT and a couple different doctors in kind of in Michigan. And so I was taking time off and then slowly starting to work back up. And so we were doing a lot of the basic therapy stuff. So, a lot of more kind of stretching, soft tissue type of things, infrared and all this sort of stim, to try and get the tissue healthy. I made the decision to move back to Washington as I was coming back from that time off. So I was starting to try and ramp up mileage. And then once I moved back to Washington, I kind of hit this wall where I just couldn't progress beyond a certain amount of mileage without it hurting. And so once I moved back to Seattle, I took some more time off and then started working with Dr. Rao at University of Washington Medical Center. And so worked with him a little bit. And I think at that point, I got some imaging done. And I think at that point, I already knew that I had a little bit of a bone spur, and it had been kind of brought up like, hey, this might be contributing to the Achilles pain you have, but if we can loosen the tissue, we can probably work around it. Well, with Dr. Rao, kind of on that same idea, I'd only come back once. And so like, let's try and do something a little bit more aggressive for the soft tissue. So when I was with Dr. Rao, and this would have been late 2016, we got PRP injection, which meant 2 weeks in a book and in a boot, and then try to come back. And so in sort of that long, slow build up, now we're into 2017, I moved back to Bellingham, started working with a new PT to try and get some things going again, started to slowly ramp up the mileage. And at this point, we're starting to get into sort of summer 2017. And I kind of thought that I would be able to train on my own. I thought, yeah, sure, I can kind of write my own workouts or at least work with some sort of coach remotely and do everything on my own. And then I was realizing that I wasn't liking that at all. And also, I was living at home at the time and I wasn't super satisfied with that. So I wanted to make just a pretty big change. So I had been talking to my old teammate, Chris Derrick, and he had just done a training trip to Boulder. And he told me about Lee, said he's a good coach. He's got a pretty solid group here. Looked a little bit more into it. Lee had a couple athletes that I really admire. So he'd worked with Sean Quigley, who I raced a lot. He had John Gray, who I'd raced a lot. And then Laura Thwett, who had just run a really, really fast Chicago time. So he was working with road racers that I really respected. So I reached out to him to see if he would be interested in potentially coaching me. I knew that Boulder, right, I had CU here, and I knew I wanted to go to grad school. And so I moved out here as I was doing my third attempt to come back from Achilles pain. Started to get some mileage, started to do a couple workouts, and then it flared up again. And so then I came to a doctor here in Boulder and had some more imaging done. We were abandoning about the idea of whether or not we wanted to do more soft tissue stuff. I was a little over it at that point, and I was getting a little petulant. I was a little tired of kind of working with kind of the soft tissue thing. At that point, I had convinced myself that the Haglins, kind of that bone spur, which the doctor that we worked out here, Dr. I can't remember his name. I know I'll be able to come up with it in a second. I feel really bad about that. Working with him brought up the idea that the Haglins might be the issue. And so we finally made the decision in like February, March of 2018 to actually get the surgery, and then had it in May. So by the time I moved out here, I was pretty convinced that I needed to do something drastic. I was pretty over the constant rehab cycle of trying to address the soft tissue part, because it felt like anytime that I would reach this certain threshold of mileage, it would flare up again. And I just, at that point, I was kind of of the mindset, like, if this doesn't work, I'm probably going to stop running, because I can't be in this constant rehab hell that I'm in right now.
Yeah. All right. So, it's like, you get the surgery and try to move on. After you get the boot off your foot, what was it trying to train like? I think I read somewhere that you'd run for a minute and then walk for 9.
Run, yes. So I was in a cast for 2 weeks, and then a boot for another 6 weeks, and then I think it was maybe a month before they let me actually start doing any sort of loading, so I could kind of walk around for short periods of time, but I wasn't able to do any sort of jogging activity for another month. So kind of in that period, I'd been getting into the gym, trying to address like hips and glutes and upper body type of stuff to kind of get the rest of the body prepared to handle it when I came back. And then, return to running. Lee's progression was we would do 3 times, 1 minute jog, 9 minute walk. And then if that was okay, the next day you come back and you do 2 minutes jog, 8 minute walk, 3 times that. And so essentially 30 minutes of activity, and you slowly change the ratio as you went along. And then if any day you had a setback, had to go back to the start. So I did have a setback in there somewhere. I think I'd gotten up to like 7 minute jog, 3 minute walk, and it started to flare up. And so we went all the way back to, I took a couple days off, and then all the way back to 1 minute jog, 9 minute walk. So that was probably, I don't know, a 3-week, 4-week period before I actually got back into any sort of jogging type of thing. And it was all loops of this turf field pretty close to my house, just half an hour, just round and round in circles. And luckily it was summer, so I didn't have to deal with snow or anything. But Lee would come out there and just kind of walk around with me, and just slowly built it up from scratch. But once I got through that initial part, I haven't really had any major Achilles issues since. So that's been anybody out there with the Haglunds,
Yeah.
surgery shouldn't be your first goal, but I will say that it does wonders for things. So
Uh-huh.
I've never regretted that decision. I think it was the
Yeah.
exact right thing
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. So, 2019, you start building yourself up. I understand, you ran Boulder, and then, just, was that about the time that you and Lee decided that, maybe a fall marathon was in the cards?
We'd always had that plan. I mean, honestly, we'd
Yeah.
planned to come back even a little bit earlier.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I think Chicago 2019, or well, really any fall marathon would have worked. But we were trying to go out and get a qualifying time, so we wanted the fastest score as possible. So it was probably going to be either Chicago or CIM. But then CIM's a little bit too late to be able to come back for the trials. So Chicago was the one that made the most sense. And that had always been the plan, assuming that I'd been able to get the Achilles back into shape. So yeah, that Boulder. I wasn't actually supposed to run the pro race there. I was supposed to be in the community race, but they had somebody drop out last second and they needed a replacement. So Lee's like, well, you've had 2 races, so let's throw you in the pro field. And then I went out and of course got my ass handed to me. But I think it was fun to be back in a professional race of that size. And then also being a Boulder person, it was fun to be one of the local runners there. You get a lot of cheering along the sidelines. So yeah, the marathon had always been the goal. I think we had slightly different ideas about what the expectations for that race were. I honestly would have been happy to just go out there and try and get the qualifier, like just finish. Whereas Lee was talking a little bit more aggressively. He thought I was capable of running a little bit faster time. And as he so often is, he ended up being right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, you're almost a minute under the Olympic standard, and you would have gotten it anyway, since you finished in the top 10. So now you got to feel like you're in a pretty good spot going into Atlanta, assuming you can stay healthy, right?
Yeah. Well, so part of it was running the time, right? At 2:10:36. Like that's a pretty solid time, and it was a big PR for me. And but at the same time, a lot of Americans in that race. We had 4 guys under 2:11 and 10 guys under 2:12. And some other people had run fast, right? Jared Ward and Scott Bobble had gone sub 2:10. So America in general was already a little bit faster. So
Yeah.
it wasn't so much the time that gave me confidence, but it was that I was the top American in that race. I beat a really strong field of a lot of the guys that I thought were going to be contenders come Atlanta. And not only had I beaten them, but I felt like I'd beaten them by being aggressive and really being able to push the pace and kind of play some tactics games over the last 4 miles or so, which I figured was going to be the case when we got to Atlanta. It was going to probably, with this many people this close in time, Atlanta was probably going to be coming down to those last few miles. It wasn't going to be something where 3 people run away and then they're kind of jogging it in the last little bit. I was going to have to be fighting. And I felt like I really not only ran fast, but I ran fast with a fast finish at Chicago. And that gave me a lot of confidence. I felt like I was in a position to really compete at the end of a race, not just kind of be there and hope I was able to hang on.
Right.
So I think that was the bigger confidence going into that race.
Mm-hmm. Now, afterwards, were you approached at all? I assume someone had to have approached you about possibly a sponsorship deal.
We had some interest from some people. Like that time of year, a lot of the money for the following year has already been committed.
Right.
And I think one of the other things that was kind of hurting me is, that was essentially my first good race since, I mean, technically 2016, but I don't think that trials race was particularly good, right? So I hadn't really done a whole lot. And so I think a lot of people, I think it was pretty easy to write that off as not necessarily a fluke. Like it was clear that I still had some talent, but whether or not I had the kind of talent that would be able to carry forward into a long-term pro career, I think some people were maybe a little bit hesitant. There wasn't a lot of money floating around. They kind of committed their money already for the trials buildup. So we did have some interest, but the way we were thinking of it was, we don't want to sign some sort of deal that's basically just going to be shoes and a little bit of money. Because yes, you have a little bit of support, but if that support's not going to radically change, can I quit my job with this amount of money? Can I, pull back on these other things that I'm doing and really focus more on running? Any of the contracts we were looking at really weren't going to do that. And in the process of signing that contract, we're going to kind of restrict, what kind of shoes I get to wear. I might have more media commitments and all that kind of stuff. So by staying independent or unsponsored, we'd have, some more options, and I would be able to, be unrestricted in what sorts of equipment I got to use or any of that kind of stuff. So, yes, we had some interest, but nothing that was going to really make or break my ability to be competitive.
Uh-huh. All right. So now we come to the trials. Did you leave Boulder at all to do any part of your buildup to the trials?
Well, I went home for Christmas, so I spent about
Yeah.
2.5 weeks in Bellingham,
Uh-huh.
doing a little interurban running. And then I also did 2 10-day stints in Scottsdale, Arizona. So
Yeah.
a friend of a friend has a house there, kind of in northern Scottsdale, right next to a whole bunch of the open parks. So got there to get out of the snow a little bit, do a little bit more warm weather training. So I would say about half my buildup was in somewhere else other than Boulder, because Boulder, once the trails freeze up, it becomes a little tough to get in some of the workouts we need to get in.
Uh-huh. Now, what was the race plan going into the race?
Pretty much exactly how it played out. So, it's a championship race, so no one's really going to be interested in pushing from the front unless they really have the idea that they're going to try and break the field. And we didn't think that many people were going to be interested in that, except like maybe the Army guys, if they were going to pack up and try to run as a group. Beyond that, we thought pretty much everybody would be content with a solid pace, but nothing crazy. And so the idea was stay in the pack and make sure that you're with the guys that you think are going to be competitive towards the end. So Jared Ward was definitely a guy that we were queuing off of. He's a very smart and very consistent runner. So, if he's there, you're probably in the right place. He just has a long history of being at the right place at the right time. And he's just a very savvy marathoner. So we're queuing off of him, queuing off of Scott Bobble, Brandon Gregg, keeping an eye on Galen. He's a guy that I think can kind of do what he wants at the marathon level, assuming that he's healthy, but also paying attention to, who else would have been in there? The Northern Arizona pack, Leonard Career, all those guys. Just make sure you keep an eye on them. If a big pack goes, you need to go with it. But otherwise, this is probably going to be a first 14, 15, 16 miles is all going to be just stay in the pack, stay relaxed, not really focus on anything, and just be ready to race hard over that last 10K, 12K, 15K, which is exactly how it played out.
Yeah. Now, when Galen made the break, what was it like in the pack? Could you sense guys were starting to get itchy?
I don't think people were starting to get. Well, some people were starting to get itchy. So I didn't see Galen's real break. So he started pushing. I guess it would have been around 14, 15 miles or so. He had that small surge that really strung people out. And then Abdi, a couple of the Army guys, McDonald, and a couple other people kind of went with that initial surge. And I was in the chase back off of it. Again, queuing off of Scott and Jared, Chris, Derek, a couple of the guys. It was a little bit earlier than I talked with Coach. Coach said, we want to wait till 18, preferably 20 miles before you really start to make a move, because you just don't want to get caught up in this back and forth surging. You don't want to go from too far out because this course is hilly enough and it's going to be windy out there. And if you beat yourself too much up too much early in the race, you're going to pay for it over the end. So I was kind of following that idea. I was thinking more of that 18, 20 mile range. So I don't think anybody was antsy. By that point in the race, most of the antsy had been beaten out of people. So I didn't see Galen's full break, and I didn't actually realize that he was off on his own until 22 miles when I was starting to reel in Abdi and Leonard and Augustus. I was looking ahead and I was like, okay, that's the lead pack. If I catch those guys, it's going to be however many people for 3 spots. And then I realized, oh no, there's another white jersey like half a mile ahead. If I catch this pack, it's going to be 4 guys for 2 spots. So wasn't antsy there. When I made my break, I was kind of the only one in the pack left that was really antsy, because I was expecting, you go down the Peachtree Street and then you turn around. It's this little hairpin turn coming back into the city, and you've got probably a 2-mile straightaway. I was expecting more people to go with me, because that was kind of make or break time. That was essentially the last chance we were going to get to put in a hard move. But apparently I was the only one that really had any gas left, because I was the only one that went. And exactly as I think a lot of people anticipated with a course that's hilly, it's just going to beat some people up. And you're not going to notice it until 16, 17, 18 miles. That's when it's finally going to start to take its toll. And when it does, a lot of people are going to have a lot of hurt for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know there's a little bit of a gap, if I recalled, between about 18 and 22. Did you have a feeling that, oh shoot, I might have let some of those guys ahead of me get away, and I could be done?
Yeah. So, I mean, even before that, like 15, 16,
Yeah.
the gap was pretty big. And I was a little bit concerned that, I might have just let my chance go. At the same time, I had faith in the plan. Where I was following the plan. And to that point, Lee had never steered me wrong, and he really didn't steer me wrong this time. So when I made my break, I was a little bit concerned that it might have been too much. I don't think I surged until 20 miles or so. And I think at that point it was about a 45-second gap was what I've seen. The nice thing was that there were still a couple guys in between me and the actual chase pack. So I had a couple guys I could look at, and I could kind of use them as intermediate goals to catch in the Abdi and Leonard and Augustus. Yeah. And then the other thing was, I think once Galen left, they settled in a little bit, and they decided, I'm speaking for them, but I think they were thinking, we're not going to catch Galen. So at this point, it's a 3-way race for 2 spots. We've broken the people behind us, so let's just focus on beating each other here. And so I think they were conserving energy a little bit, and they slowed back down to like 5-minute miles. And when I made my move, I started running like 4:45s. And when you're picking up 15 seconds a mile, you get to see those chunk gains. They're coming closer to you, right? And they're coming to you visibly, right? A lot of times when you try to close those gaps, like it just never seems to make a difference. But I had them in my sights, and they were coming back to me pretty quick, and so I was able to use that. Like that's really motivating to have that in the way. And then also, I timed it in such a way that when I really needed it, I had this long downhill, because I think from about 21-ish to 23, it's this really long downhill, a couple small ups in the middle, but you can get really aggressive on the downs, and if somebody's not pushing the downhills, you can make up a big amount of space. So I had them in my sights for a long time. And the other nice thing was, even though lots of turns, there was lots of long straightaways, you can just see them come back, and it's much more motivating to be the hunter than the hunted. So I was chasing them down. I was the one being aggressive and making the moves, which is, I think, a much better mental place to be in towards the end of the race than just trying to worry about the guys next to you.
Yeah. Now, did you have anybody out on the course, like in that last 4 or 5 miles, say, hey, this is where you got to go?
So a guy I went to high school with was out there like around 23. My strength coach was really, I'm glad that he put himself where he did. It might have been nicer to be where all the people were, but parts of that course were just insanely loud. Like I got caught next to the side of the road a couple times, and just the noise of the crowd was starting to give me a little bit of a headache. They were so loud out there, which is, it's awesome to see that kind of crowd support, but they were just, you couldn't hear anything. So my parents were out there, my coach was out there, family was out there all over the place, didn't hear anybody. But inside of that 21 to 23 range, a few less people on the course. My strength coach was out there, a high school teammate, and then my college teammate, Elliot Heath, was out there at around 23, starting to go into that hilly portion, going into the last 5K or so, and give me advice about how to run the hills, and like, this is how far, this is like the time gap, and if you if you run that hill aggressive, you're going to be able to get him. So I definitely had some people give me some advice as I was closing the last little bit of the gap, and it was really useful to have him out there when I needed that support the most.
Yeah. So, that, and then someone had, what were you thinking when you grabbed that flag, and, you still had, Abdi and Lenny still on you?
I've said this in a couple different spots, but
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're going to call it marathon mind or race mind or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I was really, really tired, and brain doesn't quite work. So I've miscounted laps at least one time in my career, and you've seen other people do it too.
Yeah.
You just kind of get into this little funk, and your brain starts to play tricks on you because it's not really getting enough oxygen. So when I saw them holding out that flag, as I saw them holding it out, one, I think it was just sort of an automatic response. Oh, you're handing me something, I should grab it. But also, I was thinking to myself, like, well, they wouldn't be handing it to me if it was still in contention. Like, if they're handing out 2 flags, that must mean that Abdi and I are away, and it's just between us 2. I've made this team. Leonard must be so far back that he's not going to make it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't hand you the flag. And then as soon as I took it, I realized that was probably not the right assumption to make. Like, I don't think that they were really thinking that. I think they were just I think it was a couple of volunteers that just were told to hand out flags no matter what. And I was like, oh, Leonard probably is still right there. Yeah. This is going to look really, really embarrassing if I get caught. So, I mean, honestly, it might have been a little bit extra motivation.
Yeah.
I will say that I felt pretty confident in my ability to beat Abdi so long as I kept my kick to the last second. So up until that point,
right,
I've been trying to break Abdi for the last 2 miles. I would put in little surges on the downhill and try to open up a gap, and I just kept expecting him to break because he was breathing pretty hard. He looked like he was tired, but he just kept coming back on me. But I was able to open up gaps when I wanted to. Yeah. And when I finally realized that he wasn't going to break that last 3/4 of a last mile, I was like, okay, this is going to come down to a last second kick if you're going to beat this guy. He doesn't have the strength to open up a gap on you. You don't have the strength to open up a gap on him. So it's essentially going to come down to whoever has the most at the very end. So I felt pretty good about being able to beat Abdi. Having a sub 60 half marathoner on your heels is not a great feeling, but at the same time, like, if Leonard really had that much left in the tank, he would be on us. He wouldn't be 6-10 meters back. So I don't know. I did feel pretty good about my ability to make the team. So that being said, if I were to do it again, I would not take the flag. It makes a good story now, but it was not intentional.
Yeah. So, I guess, what's next?
Well, obviously the Olympics have been postponed. Yeah. As of now, they're still going to go off in August of 2021. Yeah. I think I have seen some people, even at the highest levels, voicing a little bit of concern as to whether or not that'll even happen, which is certainly worrisome. Not a lot I can do to control that. If that's the decision that gets made, it'll be because this virus is still making the rounds and it's still being really dangerous. And I don't think it makes sense to put on an event when people's lives are going to be in danger. So not a lot I can do about that. But in the near term, just kind of build up mileage and get ready for a fall marathon. So we haven't made any full commitments yet. We're still trying to talk to. We definitely want to do a marathon major, and with everything being pushed back, we essentially have our pick of the fall marathons. So we're just kind of reaching out, and we're going to see what works out best with the schedule. I'd like to do a cross country season, but a lot of that will depend on which marathon we choose and how the overall schedule works. Again, there's just so much uncertainty right now that I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to really commit to something and get fully mentally invested in it. It's going to be about just kind of pick up mileage, get into a good rhythm, and get your runs in, and just try and get through this time and stay safe and stay healthy, and let the doctors and everybody do what they need to do to get this thing under control. That's going to be the biggest concern right now. Running's going to take a back seat, as it should. We're still allowed outside, so I can do the training runs that I need to, and when the world's ready to get back to a more regular schedule, I'll be ready to race.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, how much are you running right now?
Oh, I'm running every day. We're starting to ramp up the mileage, so plan to reach kind of peak mileage maybe in the next couple of weeks right here. increasing that 10 to 20% a week type of thing. This is definitely a time where any little kind of niggling injury, anything like that might be kind of flaring up, we're going to be extra careful about babying it, because once we get to that fall and the spring, like we're probably not going to get a whole lot of a chance to pull back. So really seeing this as an opportunity to address any sort of imbalance that might have cropped up in the previous two segments. So working with the strength coach that I work with, Kevin Purvis, a lot about, let's address, any sort of glute inconsistencies. Let's get the, your knees taken care of. Let's make sure the Achilles is all ready to go, so that when we do get to like full intensity training, we have a race that we can commit to. They're ready to handle that mileage. So being, I think, maybe a little bit slower with the buildup than we otherwise would be. Not super concerned with getting a lot of mileage or intensity in right now. It's more about kind of getting a couple tempos and maybe longer interval type of things, but really not trying to hammer it. Just get it in, keep a good regimen going, and make sure that when running starts again, that we're ready to handle it.
Awesome. Well, Jake, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to talk to me, folks. If you've enjoyed our previous videos, don't forget to comment by clicking once again on the envelope at the end of the post, or by leaving a comment on our YouTube page. Once again, Jake, thank you very much, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yep.